It's that time again for you to travel with us into the further regions of experience. We are your guides, modern day bards, historians, investigators, reporters, warrior poets. Journey with us as we together unlock the mysteries of our very world. We would like to welcome you to The Reckoning Hour with your hosts Johnny Reed, Wayne Weissenat, Max DeVille, and Emmanuel Jimenez.
And we do have our next guest coming up here, Russell Allen. How are you, sir?
Doing good. How are you doing?
Doing great.
Everything's good here in the cage. I got my ramen noodles, and I got my hot plate. And someone cleaned out my piss bucket, so I feel happy about that.
Yeah, we
living like a king.
I
we
know.
made sure that was taken care of this time.
Yeah.
It does tend to smell if it doesn't get dumped on the regular.
That's all the asparagus I eat.
Nice.
So, Russell, tell us a bit about this comic book that you have going on.
So, Xenonanite Titan will be a comic book eventually. So, there's a short story behind the whole thing. So, I started writing this book 10 years ago. I got to like 900 pages, and it's a story about Xenonanite Titan. And it's like the origin story of how he came to be, why he obtained the suit, what the suit was created for. Basically his origin story of everything leading up to when I wanted to start producing the comic book for it. And in 15, my son was born. He had to have open heart surgeries. I had pretty much finished the book. I still had a little bit of stuff that needed to be done, go back through, do my final draft of it and get it edited and all that stuff. And I had every intention of working on it. And, you know, when you go in and your kid's a week old and he has open heart surgery, it's like your mind, you think you're going to work on stuff and it never happened. You know, I took my Vita with me. I was like, oh, I'll play some games and work on my book and try to take my mind off of things. And it just didn't happen. And so, you know, he was in the hospital for a month. We brought him home. We were home a week. We went back to the hospital. He had another surgery and then a cardiac cath at 11 months. And, you know, it was just one thing after another. Our family had so much stuff going on. And then we ended up having another kid. And it's like having two kids is enough as it is, especially when they're young like that, trying to take care of them. And then on top of it, having his heart surgeries, it was just pretty much one of those things that I'm like, you know, I just don't have the time for this anymore. And, you know, my wife, we decided she would stay home to take care of the kids. And so I would be the only one working since Roderick had his heart issues and he had to go to the doctor all the time. I didn't see it working out with one of us always having to take off all the time. And, you know, daycares don't really want to take on a kid that's got that serious of an issue and have the liability of having them. And
Right.
so we're just like, you know what, at the end of the day, even if we did find a daycare that would take them, you would make pretty much what we would pay a week for both kids. So, you know, but we'll just stay home. So with me being the only one working, you know, working 60 hours a week. And then, like I said, everything else that's happened, I was just like, you know, I don't see this book ever coming to fruition, you know? And so I was pretty bummed about it because, you know, it's a awesome story. It's a great tale. It's got a lot of twists and turns in it because that's how I like my books to be, or my movies or the comic books. I don't like stuff that's predictable. And so, you know, it was kind of weird, you know, September of last year, I buried my grandpa. He had spinal cancer. He ended up with sepsis and he passed away in the hospital. And so we buried him last September. And in January, I was at work and I had this terrible pain in my side. And I'm like, you know, oh, I just pulled a muscle. It's no big deal. Well, then the next week I sneezed and I went blind while I was driving down the road for about 10 or 15 seconds. And I stopped in the middle of the road and I told my wife, I was like, hey, we're going to have to go to the hospital. So they ended up finding a mass on my liver. The following week, they went to check to see if it was benign or malignant. And they said, oh, it's just a hemangioma. It's a blood vessel tumor. You know, they're common. They go away on their own normally. But we did find a 3x5 centimeter mass on your spine. So the end of January, they did a PET scan and found that it had significant evidence of malignancy. And so they wanted to wait, you know, a couple months and check to see if it grew in size before they did a biopsy, since it was so close to my spine and so close to my lung. So we didn't really know. So, you know, me, I'm just planning for the worst. I'm just like, you know, great. You know, my grandpa just passed away from the same thing. It says significant evidence of malignancy. Something's going to happen to me. You know, I started making my bucket list. What do I regret the most? And I'm like, I really regret not finishing my book and getting this origin story out there, and, you know, trying to work on getting a comic book together and working with people with that. So I started Rust Explode Studios in February. I created the Facebook business page. I bought a website. I created a DBA in Missouri, and I'm like, I'm going to do this. So I started lining up artists, and I started rewriting the book. I did a pretty huge rewrite on it. Well, then come March, right when I was supposed to have a CT scan, I finally ended up having to go back to work because I ran out of FMLA and vacation. And my third day back on my way home, a lady ran a red light and hit me and totaled my car. So I went back in the hospital for that.
You got the best luck ever.
Oh, dude, 2020 has been a shit sandwich. I mean, it's
You
just no way around
2020,
it.
that's enough.
Yeah, and so, you know, that was the whole thing that sucked. You know, I had the car accident. I was supposed to go to physical therapy, but everything around here shut down. They're like, "Oh, you need to have physical therapy because the airbag went off on my wrist and snapped my wrist back on my left arm, and I had burns up my left wrist." But everything was closed around here, and since everything closed, it pretty much put off, you know, going back and getting the CT scan to check and see where the mass was. So.
Right.
You know, I went until June until I got back to the doctor. So in between, you know, after I recovered from the car wreck, I finished writing the book. I got 10 pieces of art done for the chapter illustrations. And I guess it was about a month and a half ago now, I finally found out that I don't have cancer. So that was great to hear.
Yeah, congratulations.
It's always good news.
Yeah,
Yeah.
fantastic, man.
Yeah, and come to find out the whole time, the pain that they missed, you know, they were so focused on this mass. I've got 11 bulging discs and 2 blown discs in my back. So I've been getting spinal injections for that. And, you know, I'll take that over cancer any day.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
I've
here
had
we
spinal
are.
injections before. They're not fun,
Oh,
but
yeah.
they're better than cancer.
Oh, for sure.
How's
So,
that?
you know, here we are. It's, you know, we roll up into November, and I'm like, you know, we're doing this. We're launching the project. I'm excited. I mean, it's an awesome story. And, you know, I've shared it with several people. It's a 200 page. So the first book, I decided to split it into 3 books. I didn't feel like a 900 page origin story was marketable to people. So I split it into like a trilogy, basically, kind of like a Lord of the Rings trilogy. So the book 1 ends off at a pretty good point in the story with the chapter illustrations and everything. And it takes out a major chunk of the book, but it ends on a pretty big cliffhanger. And, you know, it's, I didn't want to do like what they did with Wolverine or, you know, some of these other stories that they do mainstream where, you know, they've been doing the book for 50 years and then they're like, oh, let's make 6 Wolverine movies and then let's make X-Men Origins Wolverine. And it's like, at this point, nobody really cares because everybody's already formed their own origin story for the character. This is like, I want people to understand everything about the character. I don't want them to go read the comic book and be like, man, you know, none of this makes any sense. And so I was like, you know, we'll do the book. I got everything for book 1 together. I launched the Kickstarter, going on 2 weeks ago now. And you know, it's awesome. It's exciting. It's a great story. It's about Raziel Stevens. He's a family man, and, you know, kind of like me, he gets handed a crap sandwich and just basically he ends up getting separated from his family. He's trying to find his way back to his family and his way back to the earth. He doesn't know anything that's going on. You know, an accident happens and he gets stranded, and, you know, it's basically the story of him finding his way back to his family and how he obtains the suit and what the suit was built for. And, you know, the book 1, like I said, it ends on a pretty big cliffhanger. And I'm super excited. I've already started writing book 2. That's how excited I am.
Awesome. Well, I'm looking at your Kickstarter now. You've got 2151 out of $6,000 goal with 19 days left to go. So you're looking good there. So how many pages is the comic book? Is it 200 pages?
No. So this is,
or are you talking about the prose?
yeah, I'm talking about the prose. This novel is 200 pages. The next novel will probably be around 3 or 4, and then the final one will be around 3 or 4, depending on where I end with the second one. The comic book series, I'm only planning on doing like a short comic book series, probably like a 10 issue series on Xeno Nanite Titan to kind of finish the story out.
Yep.
This was just kind of like his, like I said, his origin story to introduce the universe and all the characters. And there may be a time down the road where, you know, people say, hey, I like this character. What happened? You know, you kind of left off with this character in the background. We don't know what happened to them. I could do, you know, a spinoff series of, you know, say like the Septibrute, which everyone has started calling Paco. So we've turned it into a huge joke.
Now, Russell, what's inspired you to write this? What other genres of comic or fiction?
And I've just always been a fan of like the older style way of storytelling. You know, I had some guys on my show here like a week ago that, you know, we were talking, and it was just about the pulp style stories where, you know, like Indiana Jones or anything else back from, you know, the 80s and the 70s, and even, you know, before that, when you had the old style of storytelling where it's like, hey, we've got this character, let's follow him on an adventure, and there's all kinds of crazy stuff that's going to happen. And, you know, that's the kind of storytelling that I like. And like I said, you know, I like to be surprised. You know, the stuff that we read and that we watch these days, everything's just either recycled from another story. And I'm not saying like my story is completely original. It may take from other stories that I've never even heard of, but, you know, they put more emphasis into the graphics and the special effects than they do the story. And I'm more into like, I want a good story. Like, yeah, I like explosions, and I could probably watch an hour and a half of stuff just blowing up. But, you know, it's kind of nice to have a story in there sometimes too.
Yeah. Well, I see you got some pretty solid artists on your 11 by 17 prints. You got Steph Wilson. He's a great guy. He does great stuff. You got CB Zane. Let's see, Wendy Steen Shaner. I mean, Ed Williams. You got some solid art here. So you're putting out a hardcover book, a digital copy, and some prints. That's what we're looking at here.
Yeah, so I did add a soft cover version yesterday. So the soft cover version is going to be like $30 because of the color illustrations, because there's 11 pages of color illustrations. So I started it out originally, I had 10 pieces, and it got bumped up to 13. One of them will be the metal bookmark stretch goal. One of them will be the metal trading card stretch goal. And then the 11th piece is actually going to be a bonus piece of art for the interior pages. But I did end up introducing a soft cover book. I originally only went with a hardcover just because of the fact that in actual book form, it's really hard to do different styles of the book. Like with like a soft cover, like if you do like 10 books, it's like $28 a book. And then if you do get up to 50, then it goes down to like $23 or $24 a book. And
it's like $27.50.
Yeah. And so with the hardcover, you know, I wanted everybody to get something that people later on won't be able to get. And with only offering the hardcover version, I was able to offer it for $40 just for the simple fact of a large print run meant a cheaper price on it. And I wanted to make it special. Like people that have been following me since February, or the people that have known me for several years, like Ed and some of the other artists I've known for several years. You know, 3 years ago, I got back into the comic industry. It was really funny. You know, I just randomly went downstairs one day, and because I seen a comic show on Facebook, it's auctioning off books. And I was like, man, that Punisher book's awesome. I was like, I don't know if I have that one or not. And, you know, granted, my wife and I have been together, you know, at this point for like 16, 17 years. And so, you know, 3 years ago, we've been together 14 years. And I go downstairs and I pull out all these boxes of comic books. And my wife's like, what are you doing? I'm like, oh, I'm getting my comic books out. She's like, what comic books? I didn't even know you had comic books. And I was like, oh, yeah, I do. Check out all these. And so, you know, I kind of got back into the market. And, you know, I started following artists, and I started Art Exposure a couple of years ago because, you know, that's one of the things I missed about going to cons and stuff. And even with going to C2E2 last year, it sucks. Some of these artists, they got a big following, even some of the indie artists do. And I love chatting with them and talking to them about them and what inspired them and, what they love. And I was like, hey, why don't we get on and do like a live show? All these other artists do live shows. I would love to see you guys get on and draw live. And I didn't get a whole lot of positive feedback on it. I did have a few artists on, but it kind of went full circle come 2020, the Rona hits. And, here I am. I started Russ Explode Studios back in February. I got with Wendy and CB and Ed and all them. I'm like, hey, I'm doing my book finally. Do you want to do a piece of art for the interiors? And they're like, yeah, I want to do that. And I was like, hey, with Corona and stuff going on, I know you guys are getting hit really hard because you can't really do cons. Do you want to come on and, show off your artwork for the book and then, talk about the art and stuff that you do to help promote them and get them out there and get them a little bit more work to help them out with the current situation. And they're like, yeah, I'd love that. So I did, I think it was 2 shows with the artists from the book, and then the messages from all my other artist friends started rolling in. They're like, hey, when can I be on your show? And I'm like, well, it's not really a show,
We just it was a one-off. It was a one-shot.
Yeah, it was like I was just kind of having my artists on to promote them. I'm like, why not? I wanted to do this 3 years ago. Why not? Let's do it. So it ended up blowing up to the point that I started doing 2 shows a week. I do Sundays and Tuesdays at 8:00 Central. And, I started promoting these artists and it's been a lot of fun. I've had artists, creators, and I had authors. I had a cooking show like a month and a half ago because one of the guys I know, he does a cooking show online. I'm like, hey man, people are bored at home and I'm sure they would love to learn some new recipes. Come on the show. So, I love promoting other people's work. I love showing off. There's so many indie artists and so many indie creators out there that don't get the light. They don't get the love that they deserve. And that's why I started Art Exposure. I wanted to get their name out there.
Yeah.
And, that's part of what I did with this book. All the artists that I'm really close friends with, not all of them, but I asked them to do a piece for the book because, in my prose, this is a different media that they normally don't put their work in. They usually do comic book covers or comic book interiors. And, I wanted people to be able to see their art or other book writers to go, hey, I've never thought about using a comic book artist to do my cover and, go to ask these people. So that's why I did the art book. One of the things I wanted to do with the art book is one of the add-ons. It's also in one of the tiers. You can get it available with a soft cover, with a hard cover. And then like, if you wanted an extra as an add-on, it is in the add-on section. I put like a little bit of a bio for each character, or not each character, but each artist. And so you'll get a bio of the artist, like Wendy. She does Naughty Fairy Stripper Assassins. And, and she just did the spinoff of Sireness with Tom Hutchison and CB Zane. So, like CB Zane did a piece. So it's going to have his Scorpiana and Into the Suck and, his spinoff character for Spinoff Comics, which was the Mighty Might. I wanted people to see the preliminary. So you're not only going to get like just an art book and like, oh, look, here's the 13 pieces from the book in a big scale. No, it's not. I'm not like doing it as a money grab or anything like that. This is going to be strictly, this is CB Zane. Here's a little bit about him. Here's some of the books that he works on. Here's the pencils for his piece. Here's the inks for his piece. Here's the colors for his piece. Here's my rough sketch that I sent the artist. You're going to get everything from start to finish because I like to see that kind of stuff. I mentioned the fact of possibly adding that into the Kickstarter, and it blew me away at how many people are like, you should do that because I love that too. And so I was like, you know what? If you guys want to do it, it's going to be kind of expensive. I'll put the option out there, and if nobody does it, nobody does it. If you guys are really serious about it, then they'll pick it up. So, that's the nice thing about being an indie creator. You can throw ideas out there, and if the fans love it and the people that are interested love it, you can try it. You don't have to wait for an answer or ask somebody to do it. And, and all that nonsense.
Some
So
corporate suit who doesn't understand fandom
exactly.
making a decision. That's the wonderful thing. I call it the indie renaissance right now. I mean, the big two are hurting bad. I mean, DC's pretty much out the door. AT&T's looking to cut sling load with them, I think. But and Marvel, they're doing great in their movies, but their comic books aren't doing so great. But I mean, what was it just the other day I was reading that Kickstarter made $22 million on comic books this year. And that
Yeah.
tells me that there's
That's the way to go.
I mean, that tells me there's still a market out there. And one of the great things I like about your Kickstarter is you've got a link to your Dropbox that you can read 29 pages of the book right off the bat, which is super helpful.
Yeah, so I added in there the Dropbox links includes the prologue and the first two chapters. It was kind of like it was kind of an experiment. So I have this weird thing when I write. Like I will sit here and I'll type a few words and then I'll spin around in my chair a few times and look around the room and type a few words and I'm listening to music. I got to get in the mood to roll. I got to get into the mood for the setting that I'm writing in the book. And so I'll sit there and I'll fidget around and it'll be like an hour. So granted, I get off work at like 6:00. We eat dinner, we get the kids to bed. So it's usually around like, 8:30, 9:00 when I come downstairs and sit down and start writing. And so one night I did my little hour thing where I sit here and I mess around for a little bit until I get in the mood to write. And I just started flowing and I get to the start to write the header for chapter 3. And I look over and it's like 11:15. I got to get up at 3:00 and be at work. And I'm like, oh man, it is way entirely too late. So I tell my wife, I'm like, hey, I want you to read what I got so far. I'm going to jump in the shower, see what you think and see what you think with the rewrite. Because, I did a complete rewrite of book 1. So even though the book is done, I have the 900-page story. I am making several changes to the book, updating it to stuff that's currently or has happened over the last, 10 years. And so I went and got my shower and I get out of the shower and I'm drying off and I hear, "You're an a-hole." And so I was like, wow, I garnered the response I was hoping to hear. And she opens the bathroom door and she's like, "You're not stopping there. You better get over there and sit down and finish writing." She's like, "That's totally mean. I read the chapter 3 headline and I thought you had more written. You cannot end there." I'm like, "I'm sorry. It's 11:30. I got to be up in 3 hours." So
That must make you feel good.
Yeah, and so I sent it to Wendy, and when I got the same response from Wendy, she's like, "You are so mean." I was like, "Why? What do you mean?" I was just playing it off. She's like, "I can't believe you sent that to me and you just ended it there." She's like, "Why would you even put the header for chapter 3 if you weren't going to have anything written after it?" I was like, "Well, I wanted to see if my wife's reaction was real, and I wanted to see if it elicited a reaction. And obviously, with reading up to this point, you guys are invested in the story, and that's what I needed to hear. Am I telling the story correctly? Am I eliciting an emotional response? Do you have an attachment to the character? Is it something that's memorable to you?" And that's what I wanted to hear. And so my wife doing it, I'm like, whatever, you're just doing that to make me feel good. But
Yeah,
to hear somebody else
can't trust the wife on your creative endeavors because they'll fib to you.
Exactly. And so that was the fun part too with sending it. So Katrina Rowitz is my editor. She had fun with the book. When it was done and she was sending it back to me, she said, "Well, there's a lot of notes I left in the columns." And she's like, I kept putting notes in there thinking this needed more explanation. She's like, and then I would get 2 paragraphs ahead and you would answer my question. So I got tired of deleting them. So there may be quite a few useless notes still left in the outside columns. And I'm like, okay, but there's a lot of twists and turns. I wanted to make it to where it wasn't one of those stories where you started out and you're like, oh, I know where this is going. And then you finish it and you're like, yeah, that's what happened. That was a crappy story. You're going to read this and you're going to get to chapter 4 and then you're going to be like, yep, this is what's going to happen. And then you're going to get kicked in the crotch
There
repeatedly
you go.
throughout the book.
Spun around, just like you.
Spun
and your
around.
car. Well, that
Now,
works.
Russell, now that you're back in the thick of it of comic books, do you read any others? Do you enjoy any books currently?
Yeah, I have to say the story is not taking the greatest of turns, but Vampirella has always been one of my great
There you go. That's
favorites right there. Oh yeah, I seen the other day when you were on with Larry, you got that big Vampirella cutout. That's what I was pining for in the video. I was like, man, that's been my go-to character. I've always liked the Punisher, Gambit, and Vampirella. When I was back in the '90s, we had this pawn shop that went out of business down the road from us, and I think I was like, I want to say 9 or 10. Well, I went in there and they had all these comic books, and I already had a ton of comic books, but they had a huge thing of like older comics that were they were clearancing out. They were normally like 10 or 15 bucks a piece. They were like, $1 each, just get rid of them. So I bought like all of them, and there was like a whole bunch of new Teen Titans and quite a few older books. I mean, nothing really of significant value, but that was when I found my first Vampirella comic book. It was The Vengeance of Vampirella #1, the red foil cover.
Oh
I was
yeah,
like,
yeah.
I've got it.
Man, this is badass. And so I started reading that, and that was where my love for Vampirella started. So I started collecting, some of the Harris comics, before Vengeance of Vampirella came out. And then, I started collecting after that. So I still get them because, there's a lot of beautiful covers, Lucio Perillo, his painted covers. Sometimes I just can't pass those up.
Oh no,
But
you can't pass those up. They're just beautiful.
Oh, they're gorgeous, especially the one he did with Deja Thoris. That was one of the ones last year when I seen him at C2E2. I was like, man, I got to get this signed. And it was really funny. It was the first time I've ever walked up to an artist and I handed him a copy of the book and a copy of the variant. And he was like, wow, I haven't seen these yet. And then he was like, oh, they made a variant of it? I didn't even know they made it, because they made a close-up version. And I think there was 50 copies of it available, and it was in this bright purple pink color. And so it was awesome. He's like, hold on, I think I got a pink marker. He's like, I love what they did with this. And he signed it with pink marker. And it was really
you're talking
cool.
about the 50th anniversary where they did 50 different variants?
No, this was Vampirella Deja Thoris #5,
okay.
I believe.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a good one. I do like that one.
It's the one where they're both nude, and then Vampirella's standing behind Deja Thoris with her arms wrapped around her and her face in her neck.
Yeah, I like that one a lot. I got a spinner rack that's got all my Vampirella comics on it behind me.
Oh yeah, so that's what I started collecting. 2.5 years ago, I started collecting the original Warren series. So I got 1, 2, and 3, and it graded, and I've got 5, 7, and 10. It's been impossible to find 4, and of course, in the pandemic, with me missing all this work and trying to sink all the money into this book and quit collecting, it was 2 months ago, a #4 popped up on eBay for $68, and I was like, man, I don't have $68 right now. I was like, maybe when I get paid, I can swing it. And then literally an hour later, it was sold. I'm like, yeah, I kind of figured that was going to happen, because they're usually $300 and $400.
Yeah, for whenever I have it, I take a look at something that I want to buy, and I'm like, okay, that's 70, that's $80, and I'm like, okay, that's 70 or $80, but really, what it is that's a page, for me getting a page done. And I haven't bought anything for myself in quite a while. I mean, I did have to go buy a new phone because I threw my phone on the ground somewhere and lost it somehow. I don't know. I really have no idea where it went or how it got disappeared. So maybe it was stolen, but I lost my super expensive phone and had to go buy me one of those cheap prepaid pay-as-you-go type of things, because the provider I used was less than helpful. Let's put it that way.
So yeah, I mean, that's pretty much the gist of what I read as far as the mainstream comics go. I mean, Punisher kind of has taken a a term for the worst. I know everybody has mad hate for the
Oh.
Punisher, but
Punisher
man,
Max was fantastic.
Yep.
The Ennis run is
Garth Ennis, yeah.
Yeah, I have that run. That's a great run.
Yeah, there's a lot of series and runs of that book that are absolutely fantastic. I mean, I even like the first movie. The second movie didn't have the greatest of acting, but you know, it is Russ Explode Studios. I love to blow stuff up, and you know that scene where that guy's doing parkour across the top of the building. He's in the middle of
So
a
with the rocket
backflip.
launcher.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's awesome.
Oh man, I rewound that and watched it like 7 times. My wife's like, "There's something wrong with you." I was like, "That is the funniest freaking thing I've ever seen." I'm like, even if the rest of this movie sucks, this was
Right.
the best part of the movie right here.
I'm a really big fan of the Netflix series, The Punisher. They did.
Yeah, I've been wanting to watch that, but we had, you know, with working on this and trying to crank this stuff out, I haven't really been watching anything.
Yeah, I totally get it. I haven't watched a whole lot of anything. I mean, the only thing I caught the first half of the new Mandalorian last night, which we can't talk about because Johnny hasn't seen it. And
Yeah,
then
I think I'm
caught-
on still chapter 11 or
Yeah,
12.
I caught the first the rest of it this morning before we started this, but it's good. It's good. I'll leave it there. The introduction of Ahsoka was fantastic.
Oh, yes, it was. Yes, it was.
Yeah, I read a lot of indie books too. You know, I like some of the indie stuff, like I said, Wendy Steen Shainer's Naughty Fairy Stripper Assassins and Into the Suck and Scorpiana. Those are a couple series, you know, that it's taken me a little while to get there with everything going on, but I got the back issues to that and reading it. And there's another Kickstarter going on right now that they sent me over like a preview. I did a show with them last week, and Space Oddities, and I was just cracking up because, you know, it was kind of funny. You know, we get on the show and like we had never talked before, you know, and I get people on the show and it's like, you know, I don't really like to talk about the Kickstarters whenever I do the shows because, you know, it's like if people want to know more about the project, they can go read it. I'm more about, you know, what's the inspiration that inspired you? Let's get to know you. I want to know who made the book and what kind of stuff you're into. And so we get to talking, and I start talking about how I did blasting because that's kind of where Russ Explode Studios comes from. The books with heart is kind of like a symbolism, you know, with my son and
your son.
Right.
and his heart surgeries. And then not only that, but because it's a passion for me. My writing has my heart in it because I really love writing and I want to keep bringing stories for years to come that people are going to read and they're going to love and they're going to come and talk to me because that's what it's all about, you know, is making relationships with people. And you know, it's not about the money, it's about the relationships and getting to talk to people and talk about the universe you created and see what they like and what they don't like and, you know, the questions they have, try to explain those and just share a common interest in something. And so we get on and we're doing this show and I'm like, we're talking about, you know, blasting. I did blasting for several years and, you know, blowing things up because it's one of the big things I like to do. And they're like, oh yeah, we blow up stuff all the time. And we started talking about explosions and they're like, you know, and then we got to talking a little bit about their book and they're like, yeah, a lot of people might not be into the book because it's more like a space pulp opera book. And I'm like, dude, that's what my book is. Like mine's a space pulp opera too, because that's the great time to storytelling. And that's what I brought up, you know, the Indiana Jones reference. And it's like they couldn't have said it any better. You know, that was a great time of storytelling. The adventures were great. It had a great story to it. Yeah, they had awesome special effects in it, but they really concentrated on the story and what matters. You know, that's like, you know, with the Star Wars movies. Out of all the newer Star Wars movies, most of them are okay. They have a decent story. But they concentrate on like all the big budget explosions and stuff like that. But the now I'm gonna have a brain fart. What was the one where they got the Death Star?
Actually, that was Rogue One. But
Yeah.
actually, we've only got a minute left. So if you can let people know where to contact you, where to get in touch with you. I mean, your Kickstarter, you said you had a website, your Facebook.
Yeah, you can contact me. You can get a hold of me at Russ Explode Studios, Books with Heart. If you Google Russ Explode, it's R as in Robert, U as in Umbrella, S as in Sam, S as in Sam, X Plode. So it's basically Russ Explode with no E at the beginning of Explode. You'll find all my stuff. I'm We got a website at www.xenonanitetitan.com. Rust Explode Studios has all my links to my website, the link to the Kickstarter. The Kickstarter is Xenonanite Titan, The Fall Before the Rise, which is book 1 in the trilogy.
The Reckoning Hour is produced by Reckoning Productions, LLC, with your hosts, Johnny Reed, Wayne Weissenat, Max DeVille, and Emmanuel Jimenez. Produced by Max DeVille, voice talents, Raven Reed.